Hi, and welcome to this teaching tip session. My name is Maria Snarski, and I am the Regional English Language Officer assigned to the Public Affairs section of the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi, India. And I work on managing English language programs for India, Afghanistan, and Bhutan. In this teaching tip session, I will try to demonstrate a learning wheel that I developed to help reluctant readers become more independent and thoughtful consumers of text. I say try because it's so much better in person, but we'll see how it goes. All right, this is the reading wheel that I developed, and you can see it has probably 4 different sections: the gray pre-reading, blue while reading, the sort of pinkish red post-reading, and then just a cover, title cover. And these are 4 sort of thick construction pieces of paper put together, and each level or stage of reading has various thoughtful questions for both the reader and or the teacher, the educator, to help reluctant readers become more independent. So I created this reading wheel based on my experience over the years encountering people with very low reading skills, or teachers who have said their students will finish something, they'll read it, and then they don't know what they read. And I think for those listening, it's pretty clear we know that learning how to read is simply just not the same as reading to learn. So while students may have the actual ability to read, they are often not equipped with making meaning from the words on the page, or going beyond the word level reading and reacting to what is written on the page. And that's what we need in terms of reading to learn. A common complaint that I've encountered is that tertiary level students are not equipped with the reading skills necessary for academic study. In many countries, secondary school, it so happens that the focus is on memorizing passages and noting expected interpretations, or just regurgitating that information during an exam to pass. And that approach works to a certain extent, but it really does not work out in tertiary study, where in further education, where one is expected to read more complex texts, make connections with what they've read, and form and express opinions. So in this session, like I said, I'll go through the reading wheel, and it's really kind of a one-stop shop of what's at each level. Some of the techniques are things you're surely aware of, you've used, but I've put them all in one place, hoping that it would be good for educators and also for learners. Before we get started on that, just kind of a reminder of just how much do people read in a day? What kind of skill is this in an everyday activity? And some people may, initially think, well, I don't read that much. I don't have time. It's like, but you're reading actually all the time. You really are. We wake up reading. We read not just books and articles and texts, but we read clocks and watches and phones and signs and cereal boxes. So this elusive skill, this receptive skill, we may think we can watch people read, like, oh, I see them reading, but we don't know what's happening in their head. And therefore, I think that's what happens when students will read and plow through something, and then they don't understand what they've just read, because there's so much more that needs to happen while reading. And this is what I hope to demonstrate. Okay, so here's another picture of the reading wheel. I'll show you a sort of mom and pop animation of it, to show you just like what it should be able to do. All right, so you got a sense of how it twirls, and really it doesn't need to, of course, go that fast. It's just more about the different sections have different pieces of pie, or different information at each level. So as I said, it has the same three reading stages that I think we're all familiar with: the pre, the while, and post. And I'll go through briefly just what is in each one, since otherwise you can't see below. In the pre-reading, we have 5 elements that I'll go over, and it's, what are things that happen naturally for most regular readers, but that reluctant readers or inexperienced readers need some support with. Well, they first need to know why they're reading, because it will make a difference of how you approach the reading. Is it for fun? Is it enjoyment? Or am I going to be tested on this? It really makes a difference of how you approach a reading. And I think students need to know that all of these factor into the way you read. The next is, what am I reading? Again, there's so many options out there. As I said, we're reading from morning to night. We maybe just don't think of it. Anything from, what we expect, like texts, academic texts, to emails, tweets, newspapers, flyers, signs, food products. You approach each item differently, and you should. So students need to know that. And then naturally, once you have what you're reading and why you're reading, is what do you know about this already? What is it already in your mind that you can bring to this topic? And this is something that, again, happens quite naturally, but teachers can bring it out through brainstorming or different, graphic organizers, charts, mind maps, and so on. Some of you may be familiar with the KWL chart, and that's, what do I know, what do I want to know, and what have I learned? And that's one way to approach a reading, and it's pretty standard way to kind of pre, during, after. I've updated that to something, I'm not sure if we could call it the Kneffel chart, but it's a little bit more of not only what do I know about this, what do I need to know or need to learn? Why am I reading this? Because sometimes if you're doing research, you're looking for particular information. So what do you need to learn? And maybe depending on the resource, what do you expect to learn on this text? And also, these days it's more and more, I mean, it's always been important, but what are the so-called facts that I should maybe double check on and not just, accept? And then there's, what have I learned? So it's a little more expanded for this pre-reading. Another one is just to identify where the source is from. Like, where is this from? When is it from? So that you can kind of also tuck that away in terms of how this features into what you're doing and what you're researching, or what you're sharing in terms of information. I think we've probably all come across folks who have shared articles or something on social media that is actually old. It's quite dated, but you see it for the first time. It's like, oh my! So just share it right away, and it's actually an old article. So the date's important, and that's something I think a lot of people forget to check before they share or before they use it. The last one is getting into the prediction. So what do I think this is going to be about? Like, what do I want? Just priming yourself for the while reading, setting your schema. Teachers can, of course, pull out quotes, maybe pull out pictures. It's very easy just to take the title, and this is why you picked it up, perhaps. If it's assigned to you, just taking the title and thinking about it. What do I think this is going to include inside? Okay, let's move on to while reading. In while reading, of course, it's not about just, again, plowing through and having a steady pace of just going through the reading. There are a lot of things that should happen at this stage, and one of the things is having the students recognize they themselves need to ask themselves, am I understanding this? How is my comprehension? And not just every time you see a vocabulary word, underline it that you don't understand. It's, should I slow down? Should I speed up? The one I love is, should I reread? I find this happens to me quite a bit, that I might read to the end of a page in a book and wonder, wait, what did I just read? And so students need to know they can reread, they can speed up, they can slow down. This is a fix-it strategy to help them with their comprehension. It's not just about going straight through. And of course, the predictions, they should be checking their predictions. They should have them handy. If they wrote down some predictions, they should have that sheet right there and check. Has what I predicted, is this here? Is it different? Or just to confirm, which goes along with the next while reading piece of the puzzle, which is comparing content. So this one, of course, it's you have this topic that you're reading about, and you have some prior knowledge, and what is this new text saying? Is it matching what you know? Is it contradicting? Is it adding? What is it adding new questions for you that you want to research? This all are the sort of elusive steps that are happening while a good reader is reading. It's just happening just spontaneously. And students need to know they can stop and make these connections. It's important. They will leave with the reading with a much better sense of what it's about. And the last one on this is reading critically. Just knowing is, if they are aware of what kind of text this is, they could then have a better sense of what they should be expecting in terms of, is it mostly facts? Is it an opinion piece? Is it presented more as fact, but it's actually opinion? Getting used to these kind of judgments of a reading. And these days, more and more, there's so much information coming at us that just some of the texts that come with lots of misspellings, grammar mistakes, or questionable photos, they may be manufactured texts that are created to intend to sway a certain audience. And students need to realize this: just because it's published, quote unquote, does not make it real necessarily. So this is looking at a text more critically in this way. Now let's move to post-reading. In post-reading, we think of this often as the comprehension questions. Most often. There are many other things you can do with post-reading, and I actually don't get into that so much, but this is more of the comprehension questions that most passages have. And it's just like, what did you understand from this text? And here are some questions, please answer them. I first came across something called the QAR technique, the question-answer relationship technique, somewhat recently. And I thought it was really changed how I looked at comprehension questions. Because what I've noticed, or had noticed, is that there are two levels of questions. And I think for a long time, we limited, or passages were limited to two actual questions, two types of questions in one level. So let me go over this for you. In this post-reading questions, the QAR technique is really talking about questions that happen and focus on information inside the text and information that's outside the text. And from what I have seen, many teachers focus on inside the text questions. But they think they're focusing on some really more complicated questions. But in the end, it's often really focused on inside the text information. So inside the text, the most basic one I think we're all familiar with is the right there questions, the ones that are super easy to find. You scan and you find it. But a new reader, this is a new skill. What is the date of something? The color of something? What is someone's name? So you can scan this quite quickly. And I think we're all pretty familiar with that. And that is just sort of the lowest level of questioning. If we think of this as, I'll use Tom Sawyer, the story where he paints the fence, as an example for these. And if we think of that story, if you're not familiar, but you'll hear enough on this portion of the talk to to probably maybe go want to read it. But you get the idea. So in this one, you just say, what was Tom's aunt's name? Or what color did Tom need to paint the fence? So these are just scanning. If we go to the second inside the text question, it's called think and search. Again, this is pretty common. And in this one, you do have to think a little bit and search for some answers. It's not so much a scanning. You have to do a little bit. You have to understand the text a little more. So you have to put some pieces together. For example, for the Tom Sawyer passage, it could be something along the lines of, how did Tom feel about painting the fence? How do you know? So here you're putting some different information together to come up with the answer. It's not merely a matter of scanning necessarily. Then let's move to outside text questions. The first one is author and me. This is getting now students relating to the text, relating the passage, the information, the topic to themselves. And this is getting into some critical thinking because they're making these connections. I did not, when I worked with teachers, I did not see many of these kind of questions coming out when I asked them to write comprehension questions for a passage I gave them. And this one is simply, you take something from the text, some situation, some element of the text, and then you ask the readers to respond in relation to that with some information from themselves or their experience. So again, with the Tom Sawyer example, we could say, have you had a relative ask you to do chores around the house? What did they ask you to do? How did you feel about that? And this can relate to, like Tom being asked to paint the fence, have you ever been asked to do something? So you're taking something from the text and bringing it into their reality and their experience, and you're looking for that connection. And the last outside the text question is on my own. And this one, it sometimes seems hard to see the difference between author and me and on my own, because they're really questions that could be asked independently without even reading the text, but the text will give some more kind of jumping off point for the reader. In this one, on my own, you could ask it without having read the text, but if they had read the text, like I said, there may be more schema, more things that are generated from the reader while they're reading. Again, if they're making these connections, they might have already made some of these and they're ready to answer this kind of question. So, for example, just simply, have you ever found a way to get out of doing something you didn't want to do? How did you manage it? What did you do? So this question can be asked without reading the Tom Sawyer story. But if I reflect back right now to the Tom Sawyer story, it's about him getting out of painting the fence and how he manages to do that. And if students are making these connections as they read, it will, naturally bring up an answer to something like this. All right, so those are the 3 stages that are found in the reading wheel. I'll try to animate it one more time for you. All right, and here are all the stages that we went through that you can find on the reading wheel. All right, and if you have questions, there's my email, and there are the 2 references that featured for the content in this session. And I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great virtual conference. Thank you, everyone.